Hi, everybody. My name is Eric, and I started Bearded Bookkeeping Co. And I wanted to bring to you a Business Basics 101 video course. What I learned the hard way as a wedding photographer turned accountant. This is a Business Basics 101 video course for creatives and freelancers. A little bit about me. Who am I? I graduated from Fitchburg State University in Fitchburg, Massachusetts in 2016. I had a major in psychology, but I had a minor in business. After I graduated college, I decided to go be a special educator. I went and worked with children with autism. I was in public schools, private schools, and worked with people in their homes. And while I was doing that, I also had the summers off. So what did I do? I freelanced. That's where I kind of got the start. I went and I started to actually do videography for a sports videography for a company that filmed lacrosse tournaments and field hockey tournaments. I worked in the summers filming these tournaments that college scouts would go to, and the high school athletes would then get scouted there to go to college. I did it in the summers, and it was something to let me have some money while I had the summers off. And that was my first experience really freelancing. That's where I kind of got into it. I was always a W-2 employee working in schools and working for companies. So doing sports videography was my first taste of freelancing. I got paid through, just sent a check in the mail, and that was it. I said I got paid this much per day. They paid a daily rate, and then I went from there. But what I didn't know was now I have a 1099 to deal with at the end of the year, and I didn't know what that meant. We fast forward a couple years later. I met my girlfriend, now wife, in 2019. She started doing photography in 2019, and because I already knew how to freelance a little bit, I helped her freelance a little bit. She eventually, throughout the years, after COVID had happened, moved into weddings. She went full time, and once the weddings took off and got bigger and bigger, she needed help. A second photographer was needed, so I started doing that. She hated numbers, so I kind of stepped in there naturally to let her focus on the creative side of things. She wanted to focus on getting clients, doing the photos and the editing and delivering, and so I focused on the accounting and the marketing for her. I did all the numbers for her and everything with a little bit of a business minor background. So I took a little bit of these courses throughout the time, a little bit in college and high school. So I got the experience from just doing that. I just went out and did it. Creatives want to go do the thing, and I went out and did the thing. For my wife, it was photography. For me, it was accounting. And so when we had COVID happen, we had the schools shut down. I was in public schools in 2020. She was working at a public college, and we both had 6 months off from March to September. So she went full on into photography, and I started just doing all her accounting. Over the next couple of years, we started to get more involved in the photography community. We got in these big Facebook groups. And one thing really always stuck out to me with these big Facebook groups was that the same common questions kept coming up. Taxes, bookkeeping, bank accounts, insurance, contracts, LLC. That's why I felt that there was a gap, and I noticed that there was no place where all this stuff could be put in one place. I noticed that there were a lot of influencers and photographers that were selling courses. Their courses, they would call them business basics, but it would be, how do you get clients? How do you do marketing? What's your workflow? How do you get clients? How do you put photos into an editing software? How do you edit them? How do you deliver them? I wanted to create something that was so basic, behind the scenes business that was so generally usable that it could apply to any creative, any freelancer. If you have 1 month of experience, 1 year of experience, 10 years of experience, you will be able to take something away from this guide. And I guarantee that there's something in here for everybody, because I always see the same questions in these Facebook groups. We're going to go over and cover some of these things about sole proprietor versus LLC. We're going to cover taxes. We're going to cover bookkeeping, contracts, and business insurance, and how it all plays together to give you the solid foundation that you need to go be the creative that you want to be. So who are you? If you're a freelancer, creative a few years in, and just realizing behind the scenes is kind of a mess, this is something for you. Whether you've just started, you haven't even gotten a client yet, or you've been in business for 5+ years, you're going to take something away from this course. And this has something for everybody. If LLCs confuse you and taxes terrify you, just like my wife, you're in the right spot. So what's in it for you? You'll have some clarity to run your business legally and compliantly. You'll save some money on taxes potentially by finding out what deductions and credits are. We're going to learn some of the best do's and don'ts, and it kind of lets you focus on the creative work. Most creatives get tripped up by the business side of things early on. You don't have to have everything figured out to do it right. And one of the things we notice is a lot of creatives, especially photographers and videographers, because that's a lot of what we do. We notice that a lot of other people just get into it just because they like to do the thing, which the thing is photography for them. Nobody really goes into business because they want to worry about taxes and bookkeeping and have all that fun stuff. So let's get into our table of contents. The creative chaos, but it's organized. So chapter 1, we have business structure basics. So proprietor versus LLC. This is something I see come up a lot. What it actually means to be a sole proprietor and when an LLC makes sense. Some people think it's just because it makes you look legit, but that's not a legal strategy. Chapter 2, tax foundations for creatives. We're going to have a clear explanation of what self-employment taxes are, how they work, what deductions are, what credits are, what writing it off really means, and how quarterly estimated taxes kind of fit into all that. Chapter 3, simple bookkeeping. We're going to be just separating basic business and personal finances, easy tools to get started, monthly habits that actually stick. Chapter 4, business insurance, protecting yourself when things go sideways. This is going to cover some of the common myths, required coverage for venues, equipment coverage, and how insurance kind of fits in and works for helping you run a legitimate business. Chapter 5 is going to be contracts, clarity, boundaries, and protection. Why contracts are non-negotiable. You need to have a contract for every session you do, every client you work with. If it's free or paid, you have to have a contract. And chapter 6 is conclusion and next steps. We're going to have guidance on continuing education, community support, building confidence as you book your clients without stressing about the business side of things. So chapter 1, sole proprietor versus LLC. Professional purposes only. It does not constitute professional tax, legal, or financial advice. I'm an accountant, but I'm not your accountant. Laws vary by state and individual circumstance. Please consult a qualified professional in your jurisdiction before making any business decisions. So, what is right for you as a creative? One of the biggest myths in the creative world is that forming an LLC suddenly makes your business real or legitimate. That's not true. According to the IRS, as long as you're generating any money whatsoever, you're in business. And so if you're booking clients, sending invoices, making money, you're already in business. And so why does everyone push LLC so hard? Because they sound official, they feel like a milestone, and they get thrown around constantly. In Facebook groups or on YouTube videos, you'll see people say to LLC constantly, but it doesn't always make sense to. The real decision between sole proprietor and LLC comes down to a few things. It's hassle, liability protection. For tax purposes, everything's basically the same. For most photographers, designers, and freelancers, the tax difference is basically nothing. You form a single member LLC, which is what 99% of creatives are, is just single member LLC. The IRS treats you as what's called a disregarded entity. That just means they kind of ignore the LLC for tax purposes anyway. So what stays the same is you still file the Schedule C, which is where you put all your self-employment income and your expenses and everything. You still pay the self-employment taxes, and you still get all the same deductions as a sole proprietor. The real difference is liability protection. So the number one reason is that for a sole proprietor, you and your business are legally the same. If something goes wrong, there's not really a separation. So if a client sues you over dispute, someone trips over your gear, you can't pay a vendor, these potentially come after your personal assets like bank account, savings, or a house. The thing I always tell people to keep in mind is that a lot of photographers specifically, a lot of these photographers and freelancers and creatives, a lot of people are really young. So a lot of people really don't have assets. I don't own a home. I don't LLC myself. I'm sole proprietor and I just have good contracts. If you have business insurance and good contracts, it can go just as far with the liability protection. You don't get the separation, but not everybody needs the separation because LLCs do cost money. There's yearly fees for it. In some states, like California, it's more expensive. And especially if you're not even generating really income yet, $500, that could go a long way for you and your business. So LLC creates a legal wall between you and your business. In most cases, if the business is sued or owed money, only business assets are on the line. That's kind of the appeal. So you'll see that a lot, especially in people that are blue collar jobs. You'll see electricians, you'll see carpenters, you'll see construction companies that are all LLC because they want to contain any liability to just that business. LLC protection is not ironclad. Courts can pierce through the corporate veil if you are mixing your personal and business money, if you don't treat the business like a separate entity, or if you're committing fraud or guarantee loans or contracts personally. I've seen creators assume they're protected because they have an LLC to find out that they're just using one bank account for everything, and they never actually maintained that separation. So there are a lot of people that think that because they don't have a lot of expenses and income going in and out, that you can just keep everything in one bank account. Don't do that. Don't do that. Risk reality for creatives. For most service-based creatives, risk is relatively low. If you're a photographer, you're not selling physical products, so lawsuits are rare. Most issues are contract or expectation related, so that goes to the contract chapter we will have going forward. That kind of will explain why some of those things are in place, and an LLC doesn't help with all of those. Good insurance and solid contracts do a lot of the heavy lifting here, sometimes more than an LLC early on. Insurance is non-negotiable regardless of your business structure, and we'll touch more on that in a future chapter too. When I started, I didn't rush into an LLC. I had no home, limited savings, few assets. So paying annual state fees for protection that I didn't really need didn't really make sense to me. When it makes sense to stay a sole proprietor, your first couple years in business, if your business is just a side hustle, if your income is relatively low, you don't really have a lot of assets, you value the simplicity above everything else. There's not really a right or wrong way to do LLC versus sole proprietor. Everybody can kind of make their own decision and do what they think is best for them. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just kind of, do you want the protection to pay for it or do you not? When it is time to consider an LLC might make sense for you if your profit is consistently $40,000 to $50,000 a year. If you are doing high risk work, events, large crowds, expensive gear, especially with some of the cameras are getting really up there these days. If you're planning to buy a home or build a savings soon, so again, personal assets coming into play, that is where you want the separation. You want easier separation for your business, banking, and credit. This isn't legal advice, it's practical real world guidance. It's okay to not LLC, and I want to make sure that that's clear. It's okay to not do it. There's no right or wrong answer. This needs to be said clearly. It's okay to not have an LLC. Strong contracts are just as important and often more important in the early stages of a creative business. An LLC does not fix bad contracts, poor expectations, or sloppy bookkeeping. So here's a quick little checklist. Do you need an LLC yet? Is your profit under $50,000? Do you own a home or significant savings? Have you had close calls already? Are you comfortable paying $100 to $800 per year in state fees? And it all depends on what state you're located in or where you want to get your LLC. There are some states that are less on the expensive side of that. There are some states that are more expensive. And so it's kind of up to you if you have that in your budget as well as a business to pay that. Are you carrying solid business insurance? The business insurance will do a lot of the heavy lifting as well too. Would having an LLC actually reduce your anxiety? If most of these are no, staying a sole proprietor is probably fine for now. You can switch later. It is a simple process. How to form an LLC when or if you decide to. You can check your state. It's usually your home state where you live. You'll file articles of organization through the Secretary of State's website. You can go to services like LegalZoom. They're not required, but they do kind of do that work for you. You can go get an EIN from the IRS. That's kind of like a social security number, but it's for your business. That gets kind of linked to your business. When you do go to the next step, open a separate business bank account immediately. That is one of the first things you should do. If you do not already have that and you are operating as a freelancer or creative in the United States, you really need to do this right away. You need to have a separate bank account. Even if you don't have a ton of expenses and a ton of income going in and out, you need to have everything separate. That is so important. 6, check your state's annual filing and fee requirements. It does vary state to state, so you need to make sure that you're doing that due diligence to figure out what your state requires and how to stay legally compliant. Every state's a little different. And then a quick question and answer section that we try to do at the end of every chapter here. These are some common questions that people may have along the way, and we're just going to kind of answer them at this point. So, do I look unprofessional if I don't have an LLC? No. Clients care about your work, communication, and professionalism, not your legal structure. I've never had a client ask me if I'm an LLC or what my legal structure is. A lot of clients, it's just they look at the work, they like it, the price makes sense, and we just move forward. What does liability protection actually mean? It means your business problems are usually kept separate from your personal life. If your business gets sued, your personal assets are less likely to be involved in it if you run your business properly. If you have a home, it could make sense to have that separation. If you don't have a savings or a house, For example, like my camera equipment is worth more than my personal assets at this point. So that would be where it's limited to anyway. I don't think anybody wants my 15-year-old car at this point. Um, is photography actually high risk compared to selling physical products, especially food? No, it's not high risk. Most of the risks that you will experience if you're a photographer or a creative in that space, it's going to be contract related. That's why the contracts are so important, or something related to an accident at the time of. That's where the business insurance and the contracts will come into play. How much does an LLC really cost? I mean, it really does depend on your state. Some are really cheap, under 100. Some are, I've seen 500 to 800 for certain states. What's the one thing I should do right now? Keep it simple, get insurance, use contracts, and track your income and expenses. Revisit that LLC conversation in a little bit once your business is actually in a place where it really demands it. Why does everyone online push an LLC so early? I mean, it sounds official to say my business LLC. A lot of people think that it sounds official and it's something that's not very difficult to do. And they think that it makes them more legitimate of a business where it doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't fix, bad taxes, bookkeeping, or how much money you're making. Will forming an LLC lower my taxes? Not by itself. Single member LLC, you're treated the same as everybody else that's running their business as a sole proprietor. The only time it changes is if you elect S Corp status. That's not a beginner move. That's not really the thing we're even going to cover here. The big thing with electing S Corp status is your business needs to pay your personal what's called a reasonable salary. Most beginner freelancers are not at that point, so it wouldn't make sense for them to kind of go that route. Some photographers do, but that's way later on. Does a LLC fully protect me if something goes wrong? If you mix personal and business money, commit fraud, or personally guarantee things, you can lose that protection. It's not 100% guaranteed. If you do some of the wrong things, you can lose that protection that you're paying for. Can I switch from sole proprietor to LLC later on? Yes, that's very common. You don't lose anything. You just switch and now you're an LLC. Still file everything the same and everything. So it doesn't make a huge difference. Again, it's just that liability protection. What's the biggest mistake people make with LLCs? They think that LLC alone protects them, and they think that they don't have to follow the certain rules to keep that protection, like mixing personal and business money. A lot of people will LLC as the first thing they do before they even get clients, and then they just will mix the personal and business money because they think they don't have enough expenses where they would need a separate business account, and that's setting yourself up for disaster. Bottom line, start simple, focus on booking clients, delivering great work, and getting your taxes right. LLC is a tool, it's not a badge of legitimacy. Revisit the discussion when your business and your life start to scale. In the next chapter, we're going to dive into the part everybody really worries about, and that's taxes, what they are, how they work, and how to avoid nasty surprises. Chapter 2, Tax Basics for Self-Employed Creatives. This information provided in this bootcamp is for educational purposes only and does not constitute professional tax, legal, or financial advice. I'm an accountant, but not your accountant. Laws vary by state and individual circumstance. Please consult with a qualified professional in your jurisdiction before making business decisions. Let's start with the absolute fundamentals. As a working photographer who learned this stuff the hard way and now helps creatives as an accountant, I know how overwhelming taxes can feel. And most of us didn't start our business dreaming about tax forms or quarterly payments. And we just wanted to go create and get paid. Think of taxes like design rules, annoying until you learn why they exist. Here's the good news. Once you understand the system and how it actually works, taxes become far less scary. This chapter isn't about loopholes or tricks. It's about understanding the basics so you can avoid surprises and feel confident running your business. We'll keep this practical, straightforward, grounded in real creative world examples. First things first, what is a deduction? A tax deduction is an expense you subtract from your business income before taxes are calculated. Deductions reduce your taxable income, which means you pay tax on less money. A tax deduction is an expense you subtract from your business income before taxes are calculated. And here's an example. If you earn $50,000 from photo shoots, you're editing your creative work and everything, and you spend $10,000 of legitimate business expenses like camera gear, mileage, editing software, any of your monthly memberships, your taxable income becomes $40,000. We take the $50,000 and we subtract the $10,000 deduction. So that leaves you to pay taxes as a percentage on $40,000 rather than the $50,000. That's basically the core idea here. What does writing it off actually mean? Writing it off does not mean you just get it for free. Writing it off is just casual language for claiming a deduction. It does not mean the expense is free, and it does not mean you get all your money back. A deduction reduces your taxable income, and it reduces your income dollar for dollar. The actual tax savings depends on the percentage rate that you're paying. If you're paying 22% as a tax bracket as a percentage, and you spend $1,000 as your deduction for your expenses, you're actually only saving about $220 in taxes. So, as a real life example, when I bought my first professional lens for $2,500, it was a lot and it did hurt. And I thought the money was gone, but when I deducted it from my taxes, it actually saved me a few $100s. I didn't get the full amount back, but it certainly softens the hit and helps you understand how deductions actually work. It's a turning point, and taxes stop feeling like a punishment. They start feeling like a system I can understand and plan for. So when we get into it, what is the difference between a deduction versus tax credits? And this is something that people get mixed up. A tax deduction, it reduces your taxable income, and the amount that your deduction is varies based on your tax rate. A $100 deduction that brings your income down by $100 really saves you about $22 if you're in a 22% tax bracket. Tax credits, which the common ones are like the child tax credit, reduce your tax bill dollar for dollar. A $100 credit reduces the amount of tax you're owed by $100. The credits are what come in after the fact, after you know how much taxes you're going to pay, then it lowers the tax bill dollar for dollar. For self-employed creatives, we get a lot of deductions, which are gear, mileage, software. There's a home office business use deduction. Credits are less common, but powerful when you qualify for like child tax credits, energy credits. When the credits apply to you, it's gold, but deductions are your everyday tax tool. Basically, for deductions, the government is saying, we would rather you reinvest money in your business than to tax a percentage of that money. So as long as you are taking and spending money on your business, there's really two different kinds of deductions. The ones that occur when you spend the money, that's things like your camera equipment, that's things like websites, if you have an Adobe subscription for editing, stuff like that. Those deductions lower your income when you spend it. The other deductions that there are the ones when you file your taxes. The things like your mileage, which is always a big one for us. You can deduct any payment processor fees. That's a big one for us as well as home office business use, which maxes out at around $1,500 a year. Those deductions come into play when you're filing your taxes, which is why it's important to have good records. Things like mileage. Our mileage and payment processor fees were thousands and thousands of dollars. Remember, if you're a freelancer, sole proprietor, or single member LLC, you're responsible for two main taxes. One, income tax, and this is what everyone pays. You report your business income on your Schedule C, and you have your profit equals your income minus the deductions. The profit flows to your personal tax return, and you pay federal taxes and possibly state, depending on your state, tax on that as well. So we take the total income, all the money you made, we subtract how much you spent on your business plus what else you could qualify for. Whatever is left of that is what you pay the percentage on. The second tax that freelancers always seem to forget about, and it surprises everyone, is called the self-employment tax. This is a tax that shocks new freelancers because self-employment tax is 15.3% of your net profit. Why? Because employees pay 7.65% for Social Security and Medicare. Your employer matches that and pays the same 7.65%. But when you're self-employed, you are the employer and the employee. So you have to pay the income tax, federal and state, if applicable, and the self-employment tax, which is Social Security and Medicare. Normally, when you're a W-2 employee and you get your paycheck from working for your boss, you'll see all those deductions. You'll see state, you'll see federal, you'll see the Social Security and Medicare. Depending on your state, there may be also ones that get taken out. One small win You do get to deduct half of the self-employment tax as an adjustment to your income. This doesn't eliminate the bill, but it does reduce your overall bill. Quarterly estimated taxes, paying as you go. When you don't have an employer withholding taxes from you for each paycheck, the IRS expects you to pay the taxes throughout the year. These are called estimated quarterly tax payments. Typical dates for the 2025 returns or 2025 income was April 15th, June 16th, September 15th, and January 15th. And those are basically all the same year over year, minus like a day or two, like June 16 rather than 15. How much should you pay? A common rule of thumb is 25 to 30% of your profits. But there are a few safe approaches. You can use the Form 1040 ES worksheet, or if you did it last year, you can pay 100% of last year's total tax, or 110% if your income was over 150,000. This avoids underpayment penalties. And here's something important. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be reasonably close and consistent. Payments can be made directly to the IRS, free and straightforward. This is why good bookkeeping is important, because that's kind of how you know what to do to and how to pay. Top deductions every creative should know. These are some of the more common deductions for photographers and freelancers. All must be ordinary and necessary for your work. That's key. The deduction needs to be ordinary and necessary for your business. It needs to make sense that you're taking the deduction, spending business money on these business things. So we have equipment, cameras, lenses, lights, tripods. A lot of these are going to be photography based because my wife and I are photographers. And this is going to be for all creatives and freelancers. So kind of take some of these as you see, some of these software, maybe you don't use Lightroom or Photoshop, but photographers will. So that's certainly a deduction as well. Mileage and travel, that is standard mileage rate or actual expenses. I almost always do the standard mileage rate and just do the total miles times the rate. And it's still, we drive thousands and thousands of miles a year. So we do have a big deduction for it. Home office must be a space used regularly and exclusively for business. If you have like a separate room somewhere, or if you have space in a basement or something, this is where you would want to set up a home office, and you try to make sure you have everything that is conducting your business and only your business done in that place, not mixing business and personal. You have marketing expenses, any ads, website costs, if you have business cards or flyers you're handing out, education, such as workshops, online courses, anything that's related to your business and continuing education, that's something that you can deduct against your income. Supplies and props, backdrops, memory cards, client materials, second shooter's assistants, any kind of labor that you're paying somebody to do for your business, the labor is a deduction. Insurance and phone and internet portion of it, the percentages that you use for the business, generally about 50%. There are tracking apps that you can use. You can use spreadsheets or accounting software. Just save receipts digitally are perfectly acceptable. Some people will have a system where they just save everything physically and they will have a filing cabinet and file everything away. Some people will have a system where they take pictures and send an email to themselves with all of their receipts. Whatever is easiest for you as a freelancer or creative. Once it kind of gets to be too complicated, that's where you can bring in the extra help. Quick reality check, deductions help, but they don't replace planning. The biggest tax mistake creatives make isn't missing deductions, it's not saving for taxes at all and hoping everything works out in April. Understanding this chapter alone puts you ahead of most people. A lot of people will try to say that they take money off the top of everything they do and put money away. That's a plan too. People will sometimes, in lieu of doing estimated tax payments, they'll put money into a high interest savings account. The logic behind that as an accountant is that when you get a refund, you basically gave the government a tax-free, interest-free loan to then return your money back to you. At least some people will put their money to a high yield savings account so you can generate interest off that money throughout the year and then just pay it all in April. Closing thoughts. Taxes aren't about avoiding responsibility. They're about understanding the rules so you can plan, stay compliant, and keep more of what you earn. In the next chapter, we're going to go over simple bookkeeping basics, the systems that make everything in this chapter easier to manage. All right, question and answer for this chapter. Do I need to understand all this before I start booking clients? No. You just need to understand enough to avoid mistakes, and the rest just comes with time. What if I didn't track my expenses from last year? You can often reconstruct using bank statements, mileage logs, and receipts. It's harder, but it's more stressful. What counts as a legit deduction? Anything ordinary and necessary to your business, not personal expenses you're trying to sneak in. Can I deduct my camera if I also use it personally? Yes, but only the business portion. I recommend keeping everything as business so you can take 100% deductions on everything. Why am I paying so much more than when I had a W 2 job? You're paying both sides of the payroll tax now. So it feels new, but it's not extra. That's where I mentioned before about the self employment tax and paying the employee and employer portion. That's why it feels like there is more. There is a little bit more in terms of self employment taxes and higher taxes for self employed and creatives. But we also get to take a lot of deductions that personally you would never get to take, like all your equipment and all your driving for personal. You don't get to write those off. But for a business, you can. Why does this all feel so complicated? Because nobody teaches it clearly, not because you're bad at business. And I'm going to sound old here by saying this, but I graduated high school in 2011. I was one of the last graduating classes that had a business department in the high school. And I know so many high schools are like that now. If you didn't learn this growing up, if your parents or guardians didn't teach you and school didn't teach you, there's nowhere to learn this. And that's really part of the reason why I wanted to create this guide. There's a lot of missing information and a lot of information that's out there, but it's not really condensed into one place that kind of covers all of this stuff. That's the point of this guide, because I feel like there's a lack of education there. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just what happens. Schools have and cut departments. And unfortunately, now 15 years later, you have all these kids that grew up that don't know anything about taxes. They don't know anything about personal finance because the business departments got cut. So that's why it does feel complicated, because nobody was there to teach it. What's the business tax mistake creatives make? Not saving enough for taxes and assuming that the deductions will magically fix everything. Deductions will help you. They will not save you. Do meals count? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If you're meeting with clients or traveling, then it does. Usually it's just 50% of the amount you spend is deductible. Everyday lunches, no. You can't just order food just because you're sitting at your desk editing and you've spent a long day editing. If you're out for a wedding and you're multiple states over or a state over, you can spend money on food. You get a 50% deduction. So don't expect for the whole amount to be deductible to take off from your income. Chapter 3, Simple Bookkeeping Basics. Even 30 to 60 minutes a month is enough to avoid chaos in April. This information provided in this bootcamp is for educational purposes only and does not constitute professional tax, legal, or financial advice. I'm an accountant, but not your accountant. Laws vary by state and individual circumstance. Please consult with a qualified professional in your jurisdiction before making business decisions. The key is consistency, not perfection. You don't need fancy software or an accounting degree to stay organized. Good bookkeeping simply means knowing where your money is coming from and where it's going, and that alone makes tax time far less stressful. Why bookkeeping matters. Tracking your income and expenses isn't just for taxes. Good bookkeeping helps you understand which clients and services are most profitable, plan for big expenses like equipment, marketing, or workshops, avoid surprises with quarterly tax payments, and protect your LLC veil if you have one, or keep things simple and clean if you're a sole proprietor. Think of bookkeeping as a map of your business money. You don't need a PhD in accounting to read it, just a consistent system. Must do number 1, separate business and personal finances. Open a dedicated business checking account and ideally a business credit card. Why this matters. It helps keep everything clean for deductions. It makes filing your Schedule C way easier, and protects your LLC's legal protection if you have one. Even if you're a sole proprietor, separating accounts prevents headaches when clients or the IRS ask you for proof of business expenses. Must do number 2, track income and expenses monthly. Every month, if you spend just 30 to 60 minutes reviewing your finances, your income side, record all the client payments, invoices, whether it's Venmo, PayPal, checks, cash. Track when payments are due and when they arrive. On the expenses side, categorize your spending into buckets. Is it equipment, travel, marketing, office, software? Only track the business use portions of shared items. Those are things like your phone, internet, software, any bundles together. Tip, it's better to be consistent than perfect. Even rough tracking beats doing it all at tax time. Easy tools to get started. You don't need expensive software. You can start simple and then upgrade as your business grows. I personally switched QuickBooks once my photography income hit 5 figures. It saved hours of manual work and made quarterly estimates painless. If you're looking for a free or low cost option right now, a lot of photographers and creatives will stick with something like Google Sheets or Excel. If you don't have a ton of income coming in and you don't have a ton of expenses going out, this is totally an okay option. If you're trying to go to the next level, QuickBooks Self-Employed is about $15 a month. Tracks your mileage. It estimates your quarterly tax payments, and you can export it to TurboTax. I like the QuickBooks Online version, and that's what we've been using for the last 6+ years. There's also alternatives too. There's Wave Accounting and FreshBooks and Xero. I'm not too as familiar with these, but I know that they're alternatives to QuickBooks. Basic monthly habit. Here's a simple workflow to follow each month. Number one, download any bank statements and credit card statements you have. Number two, match transactions to the receipts, whether it's digitally or paper. Number three, save digital copies of receipts, whether it's a picture on your phone, put it into a folder, or using an app. Number four, track your mileage for business. There's apps like MileIQ, or you can just do a simple spreadsheet. That's it. Just 30 to 60 minutes a month, and it keeps your books manageable and reduces stress at tax time. This is why people get caught up and have huge tax bills when they're trying to clean up their books, not just a bill for filing the taxes in a tax bill. The accountants and bookkeepers clean up your books too. So doing it a little bit along the way every month is going to make their lives a lot easier if you're passing it off to somebody. Common mistakes that beginners make. Mixing personal and business money. This is the number one source of mistakes. Don't do this. It does not matter how many expenses you have going out and how much income you have going in. Do not mix personal and business. If you want to then pay yourself, you can have money go into your business account and then transfer it over to your personal account. You have to keep it separate. Forgetting small expenses. If you had a coffee with a client or mileage for your business, track it. It all adds up. Waiting until tax season. Consistency beats last minute panic. You have to do some of these steps throughout the year and not just wait until April comes. Last mistake, not backing up receipts. Digital copies are acceptable and safer than paper. Real life example, when I first started tracking my photography income in Google Sheets, I realized I had $600 in deductible expenses I never recorded. And that one habit saved me hundreds in taxes and showed me where my money was going each month. Bookkeeping is about clarity, not perfection. Monthly tracking prevents stress, surprises, and lost deductions. Separate business and personal accounts early, and it's easier to do it just right away than to fix it later. Choose tools that fit your comfort level. Spreadsheets are fine, but software is optional. Consistency is the biggest factor in bookkeeping success. Questions and answers. Do I really need a separate business bank account if I'm a sole proprietor? Yeah, it's strongly recommended. It keeps records clean, reduces mistakes, and protects deductions. Even without an LLC, it makes your life so much easier. Do I track cash payments or Venmo personally? Yeah, all money counts as business income. It doesn't matter if it's from Venmo, if it's a check, if it's cash. You need to be reporting it and filing for that and putting it on your Schedule C and factoring that in. How do I know what bucket an expense goes into? Think about what the expense was for. If it's cameras, that's equipment. If it was like Uber to a shoot, then that's travel. If it's for your website, that's marketing. Do I need QuickBooks or is a spreadsheet enough? Spreadsheets are fine for beginners. QuickBooks or Wave, they automate things like mileage and the expense categories and tax receipts and reports, which that's helpful once the income grows. What's the number one bookkeeping mistake creators make? Mixing personal and business money together. Do not do this. What about expenses I split between personal and business? Track only the business portion. For shared items like internet or phone, estimate the business use, which is usually around 50%. Chapter 4, Business Insurance for Creatives. A little disclaimer at the beginning of every chapter. The information provided in this bootcamp is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute professional tax, legal, or financial advice. I'm an accountant, but I'm not your accountant. Laws vary by state and individual circumstance. Please consult a qualified professional in your jurisdiction before making any business decisions. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. We're not talking about health insurance. There's no copays, no deductibles that somehow are going to cost more than your entire camera bag. Business insurance is like health insurance for your business. You hope you never need it. You don't want to think about it most days. And when something goes wrong, you're glad you have it and you're glad you didn't ignore it. Most creatives skip insurance early on not because they're careless, but because no one explains it like normal language. So we're going to fix that. Why business insurance matters, especially for creatives. This isn't about being paranoid, it's about being realistic. So if your work involves clients, events, venues, equipment, or real people in real spaces, you have risk. Even if you're careful, even if you're professional, even if nothing bad has happened yet. Business insurance exists to protect you when someone gets hurt, something gets damaged, a client claims you caused a problem, if a venue requires proof of coverage, or if your gear gets stolen or broken. The biggest myth that I have an LLC, so I'm covered. An LLC and insurance do different jobs. The LLC gives you the legal structure and separation. Insurance is about what actually pays when something goes wrong. This is one of the most common misunderstandings for this. Having an LLC without insurance is like wearing a seatbelt but refusing the airbags. It's helpful, but it's not enough. Common types of business insurance. You don't need every policy that's out there, but you should know what these are. General liability insurance, that's the most common thing. That's what a lot of people will have. This is usually the first and most important policy for creatives. It covers things like a guest tripping over your light stand, accidental damage to a venue, bodily injury, or property damage claims. Many venues require proof of general liability before letting you work. If you're a wedding photographer or event-based creative, this is non-negotiable. At this point, every venue that my wife and I go photograph at, they always require us to give them proof of our insurance. And if you're doing weddings and events, you're going to have to prove that. And all these companies, all these venues, they're going to all require it. So you are going to need it. Professional liability. This is errors and omissions. This covers you if a client claims you didn't deliver what was promised, if you made a mistake, if you caused them financial harm, if you think missed moments, corrupt files, miscommunication that escalates. This doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It means that you understand that things happen. So this is things like corrupted SD cards. This is things that could cover you for that, where things might be unrecoverable if you can't get files back for some way. There's also equipment insurance. Camera bodies, lenses, drones, lighting. This has a fast. Equipment insurance covers theft, accidental damage, gear damage while traveling. Some policies are standalone. Some are add-ons to liability coverage. If replacing your gear would financially wreck you, insure it. Definitely get your equipment and gear insured. The thing is, generally, you will have to send your gear into them if it's broken to then get a new one back or to be reimbursed. They don't always cover theft, so definitely make sure you're looking into what your insurance covers and have it laid out clearly so that way you know what it does and doesn't cover. Do you need insurance right away? Short answer, if you work with clients in person, yes, absolutely. Especially if you attend events, work at venues, interact with the public, and if you're making consistent income. Insurance is usually much cheaper than people expect and far cheaper than paying out of pocket when something goes wrong. Yeah, I see a lot of policies that are $50 to $100 a month for your business, and it covers everything you need. This is not it's not an excuse that you can't afford it. You have to have this. What insurance does not do, insurance does not make you lawsuit proof. It doesn't replace contracts, fix bad communication, or protect you from everything. It's just one piece of a bigger protection puzzle. It's not a magic shield. Common insurance mistakes creatives make that, oh, I'll get insurance once I'm more established, or nothing bad has happened yet, or my LLC protects me from everything. Venues won't ask for it, but yes, they do. Insurance is too expensive. That's not true. We need to call these out directly, and it's something you need to have as the insurance right away. It should be very early on, and that's why we're covering it in this guide. The bottom line, business insurance isn't exciting. It doesn't book you clients. It doesn't improve your photos, but it does protect the thing you're working so hard to build. Think of it as health insurance for your business. Boring until the day that it really, really isn't. Questions and answers. Do I need business insurance as a creative? If you work with clients in person, attend events, use equipment, or interact with the public, yes. Even careful professionals face risks, and insurance exists to protect you when something goes wrong. Is insurance only for big or established businesses? No, insurance is often the most important early on. And when one unexpected claim could financially wreck you, many policies are affordable even for solo creatives. Like I said, you can find ones out there for $50 or $100 per month that covers everything you need. Does an LLC mean I don't need insurance? No, an LLC and insurance do two different things. LLC creates the legal separation. Insurance is what actually pays when a claim happens. If you have to file a claim and you have to have somebody pay out because there's damages, that's what the insurance covers. The insurance will pay that out. What does general liability insurance actually cover? It covers bodily injury, property damage, and related legal costs, like a guest tripping over your light stand or damage to a venue. So if you end up walking by a wall and your camera swings because it's on a hip and you damage your camera and or the wall to the venue, you may have to file a claim and you can get potentially your camera fixed or repaired or replaced. And then you may have to also pay for, the insurance would pay for any damage to the venue even if it's just something simple. Why do venues ask for proof of insurance? Venues want to protect themselves. Proof of insurance shows that you can cover damages or injuries without the venue being financially responsible. Basically, the venue wants to know that if you go there to photograph a wedding and you damage something or something happens in the parking lot, that they know that they can go after somebody and it won't be just you that's held liable. There's a company backing you. When should I get business insurance? As soon as you start working with clients in person or booking paid jobs. Waiting until something happens is the most expensive way to learn. One of the things you should do is when you get your first paid client, before you do any work at all, your first person that pays you, you should be reinvesting that into business insurance. Chapter 5, contracts. Yes, you actually need one. The information provided in this bootcamp is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute professional tax, legal, or financial advice. I am an accountant, but I'm not your accountant. Laws vary by state and individual circumstance. Please consult with a qualified professional in your jurisdiction before making business decisions. All right, let me guess. You trust your clients, they seem nice, everything seems chill. That's great, and it's also completely irrelevant. Contracts aren't about mistrust, they're about clarity, boundaries, and protection. When emotions run high, which they almost always do when money, deadlines, and weddings are involved, if insurance is health insurance for your business, contracts are the seatbelt. You don't plan to crash, but you buckle up anyway. What a contract actually does. A contract exists to answer one simple question. What happens if something doesn't go exactly as planned? A good contract will set expectations clearly, reduces misunderstandings, protects your time and income, and gives you something to point to when conversations get awkward. A bad contract or no contract at all does the opposite. It turns small issues into big conflicts. It forces you to rely on memory, screenshots, and vibes. And it makes disputes personal instead of procedural. Contracts don't prevent conflict. They give you a roadmap for handling it. The big myth that email agreements are enough. Let me be very clear, an email thread is not a contract, a DM is not a contract, sounds good is definitely not a contract. If you're exchanging money for services, you need written terms, clear deliverables, and signatures. Digitally is fine. A contract protects both you and the client, not just the person providing the service. It ensures that expectations are aligned, responsibilities are clear, and everyone involved feels confident moving forward. If you have any questions about contracts or what should be included, I'm always happy to help and point you in the right direction. What should be in a creative contract? You don't need to write a contract from scratch, but you need to understand what should be in one. Most solid creative contracts include these core sections: scope and delivery, payment terms, cancellation, reschedule, delivery timelines, copyright and usage, liability and responsibility limits, as well as logistical and practical clauses. So with scope and delivery, we need to know what you're providing and what you're not providing. That way everything is clear and everybody understands and everybody's on the same page. How many hours are you there for? How many images or videos are you delivering? How many edits are you allowing? This section prevents just one more thing from becoming endless. Cancellation and rescheduling. What happens if the client cancels? What happens if you cancel? What happens with a retainer? Can you have retainers? Are they refundable? Are they not refundable? How does rescheduling work? Is there another retainer needed? Copyright and usage. Who legally owns the work? What usage rights does the client get? How does the work get to be shared or published? Ownership and copyright are not the same thing, and that's where contracts clarify it. Payment terms. What's the total cost of it? Is there any kind of retainer deposit or down payment that reserves the time or services? Are there payment deadlines? Do you get paid before? Do you pay at the conclusion? Do you pay later? Are there late fees or penalties? Money should never be vague. Delivery timelines. When will the work actually be delivered? What delivery actually means? Any conditions that can affect timing? And when we go into liability and responsibility limits, what are you responsible for? What are you not responsible for? What are the limits on damages? Protection if a third party causes an issue. These are the things that keep you from getting blamed for things that are outside your control. as well as legal, logistical, and practical issues. Depending on your work, it could include things about the venues or the location restrictions. What comes to mind is churches and flash requirements. That's going to change how your work gets done. If you can't use a flash and all your work is with a flash, that has to be in a contract, and that expectation has to be clear. Are there travel visa expenses? Are there meals and breaks for long events? Are you photographing a 10-hour long wedding day? And what are your breaks in there? Are you taking breaks? What is the expectation there? Force majeure, when life blows everything up. This clause deserves its own section because it matters. And this is getting its own section because this is the clause in the contract that you will get the most pushback for if you have it in your contract. This protects both sides from when circumstances make it impossible or unsafe to perform the contract. This includes events like natural disasters, severe weather, government shutdowns, pandemics, power outages, travel bans, if the venue closes, or emergencies. This contract is not about you backing out for convenience. It exists because sometimes things happen that neither you or your client can control. Like it says, natural disasters, severe weather. I remember in North Carolina, there was a bad hurricane, shut venues down, and everybody had to reschedule and had to move. This clause would be in place for things like that. Nobody can control the weather, and nobody can control what happens if roads close or venues close or people lose power for extended periods of time. This clause is what gets defaulted to because nobody's really at fault. A well-written force majeure clause explains that neither party is in breach. And what happens to payments? Are people rescheduling? Are there refunds being issued? Both sides are protected from liability. Without this clause, you could technically be held liable for failing to perform, even when performance is impossible. And after 2020, with the pandemic, this clause became non-negotiable for many creatives. We learned the hard way that extreme circumstances and situations aren't as rare as we once thought. If a client pushes back, it's usually fear, not logic. This clause protects everyone when the world throws a curveball. And again, that's like COVID. When that happened in 2020, all the weddings got rescheduled and went into 2021. Now you had photographers that were double booked. And what happens in those situations? Why creatives get burned without contracts? Common scenarios I've seen and lived through is that a client cancels last minute and they want a full refund. When somebody says just one more edit, but it turns into 10. Files that get lost due to circumstances outside your control. Timeline disputes become emotional. If venue or third party causes issues and you're blamed, the contract won't stop problems from happening, but it gives you something solid to stand on when they do. Contracts and taxes. Yep, they're connected. This surprises a lot of people. Contracts help you prove business income. They support deductions, establish legitimacy, and back up refund and cancellation policies. When accountants or auditors ask questions, contracts are part of the paper trail that says, yes, this is a real business. And contracts also get used to prove business income. So that's if you went for a loan or anything, you can use contracts of future work to say, hey, I have money coming in. And that's provable business income, even though the services haven't been rendered yet. Common contract mistakes that creators make. We need to call these ones out directly. Just using no contract at all. That's the worst thing you can do. Even if it's a client that you know very well, even if it's family, even if it's free, you need to have a contract. There has to be something in place that you can then fall back on when they start asking a bunch of questions, because there are times where family and close friends want to kind of skirt around the rules and not be treated like a regular client. Everybody gets treated the same. Everybody gets a contract, free, paid, no matter who it is. Another thing we need to call out is just copying one from Google without understanding it. Using a friend's contract because it worked for them. Their business is not your business. What works for them may not work for you. Never updating the contract as the business grows. We review our contracts every year during the slow season, and it's something that I think all creatives should do, is to understand the world is changing, and because of some of the scenarios that we go through, sometimes you need to update those things, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And lastly, avoiding enforcement because it feels awkward. Awkward conversations are cheaper than financial loss. When people fail to enforce parts of their contract, that means that other parts may not be enforceable as well. If you have something in your contract, you need to hold to it, and that's the whole point of having a contract. The bottom line, contracts don't mean you expect problems. They mean you expect reality. They protect your time, your money, and your mental health. If you're charging for your work, you deserve to be protected while doing it. Quick reality check. If you're reading this and it made you think, I really should fix my contracts, that's your sign to fix your contracts. Couple quick question and answers on this chapter. Can clients negotiate out of the force majeure clause? They can try, but removing it means you're taking on all the risk on things you can't control. The clause protects both sides and it should be non-negotiable. Are digital signatures legally valid? Yes, in most cases, digital signatures are legally valid and widely accepted. Tools like Honeybook, Dubsavo, DocuSign are standard in creative industry. We use Pixieset. Pixieset does it now, and we love that. We used DocuSign for years before that. Any accountant I've ever worked with uses DocuSign. It's very standard. What if a client refuses to sign a contract? That's a red flag. That's a problem. If someone won't agree to clear terms in writing, you should seriously reconsider working with them. A contract protects both parties. There's no good reason to avoid signing one. Do I really need a contract for every client? Yes. If money's changing hands, and even if it's not, you need to be protected and expectations need to be clear. You need a contract no matter how big or small or how casual the job feels. Problems don't usually come from bad clients. They come from unclear expectations. When should the contract be signed? Before any work begins, ideally before or at the same time the retainer is paid. No signed contract equals no obligation from either side. Chapter 6, Conclusion and Next Steps. If you made it this far, take a second to pause. Congratulations, you did it. It's over. But remember, you just learned the core business basics that most creatives don't figure out until years in. Usually after expensive mistakes, stressful letters from the IRS, or realizing they've been working nonstop with very little to show for it. This alone puts you ahead. This guide wasn't about turning you into an accountant or overwhelming you with legal jargon. It was about helping you understand the foundational pieces that keep your creative business stable, profitable, and sustainable. Because talent alone isn't enough to run a business long term. This information provided in this bootcamp is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute professional tax, legal, or financial service. I am an accountant, but I am not your accountant. Laws vary by state and individual circumstance. Please consult with a qualified professional in your jurisdiction before making any business decisions. Let's quickly recap what you now know. You now understand that simple bookkeeping changes everything. You don't need complex software or perfect records, just consistency. Knowing your numbers gives you clarity, confidence, and better decision making. You know that quarterly taxes are your responsibility, but also your control. Paying as you go helps you avoid surprise penalties and stress at tax time. You're already a real business. You don't need an LLC on day one to be legitimate. A sole proprietorship is completely fine when you're starting out, and many successful creatives operate this way for years. You also know that taxes aren't scary. They're predictable. Once you understand deductions, self-employment tax, and quarterly payments, taxes stop feeling like a looming threat and start feeling like a system you can plan for. You also know that deductions are one of the biggest opportunities. When tracked correctly, deductions reduce how much your hard-earned income is given away. Why I care about this? I've been exactly where you are. I started as a wedding photographer. I was booking clients. I was charging too little. I was confused about LLCs and terrified of the IRS. And I was hoping I was doing it right. I didn't come from money, and I definitely didn't have the business background when I started. I learned it the hard way. It was through trial and error, through stress, through Googling really late at night and hoping I wasn't missing something important. Eventually, I became an accountant, and I never forgot what it felt like to be creative first. That's why everything in this guide is written in plain English with real-world examples and without judgment, because creatives don't need more shame or fear around money. They need clarity. What to do next? Reading this guide is a great first step, and the real progress comes from applying what you've learned. Here's what I recommend you do next. Choose your current business structure and stick with it for now. Don't overthink it. You can always change it later. Open or clean up a separate business bank account. This alone will make your bookkeeping and taxes way simpler and easier to track. Start tracking all your income and all your expenses consistently. And whether it's weekly or monthly, pick something that's realistic and sustainable for you. It may only be 1 hour a week. It may be only 1 or 2 hours a month. But definitely do something that is realistic and sustainable for you. Set money aside for taxes as you earn it. And even if it's not perfect, building the habit matters more than precision. Ask questions early instead of waiting. Most problems get expensive because they go unaddressed for too long. You don't need to do everything at once. Progress beats perfection every time. And let's stay connected and keep learning. If you found this guide helpful and want more content like this, Love for you to come out and hang out with me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. That's the only social media I'm working with. It is Bearded Bookkeeping Co. On that page, I share quick practical business tips for creatives. I answer common questions for taxes and bookkeeping. I give real world examples from photographers and creatives like you. I'll also be launching a podcast soon with my wife that she's excited to work on together. We'll break down business topics and what it's like to work together as a married wedding couple. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message on Facebook. I'm happy to help. The final thoughts. You've learned the basics. You understand the bookkeeping, taxes, and what matters when running your business. But the next question usually is, what does this look like for my business? Because no two businesses are the same. General advice can only take you so far, and asking around on Facebook groups leads to mixed and unclear answers, and it's usually missing context. One of my pet peeves is people will say on Facebook, in these big Facebook groups, that they need help and they're struggling. And a lot of the answers just aren't clear. They're very vague. They don't have enough information to give an actual good answer. A lot of the times it'll be a photographer looking for help on their business. Somebody will find their Instagram and just say, wow, you take nice pictures. Which it might be true. It's not really helpful for you if you're struggling and want to right the ship. So my wife and I are introducing these brand new one-time audits for you. This first one is called the Content and Client Audit. This is for you if you want clarity on how your business looks from the outside. This is a full social media audit. We're going to review your social media and your online presence, how your content's coming across, your messaging, your consistency, and your brand clarity. We'll tell you what it looks like from the client's perspective, but we'll also go behind the scenes and we can analyze things like the analytics and your posting frequency and schedule and give you tips on that. You'll walk away with honest and direct feedback. You'll know what's working and what's not working in a clear, simple action plan. We will give you actionable steps as to things to do and to not do in order to see progress in your business. This is perfect for people that understand the business side of things, but need a little bit of help with clarity on how they should be posting. This is not an ongoing thing, but this is a one-time audit that allows you to get a snapshot of what you need to change and what's working and what's not. We're also offering what we're calling the Lens and Ledger Review. This is a deeper, full business audit combining the content and client audit as well as reviewing your income and expenses, your bookkeeping setup and organization, your pricing and profitability, tax savings that you should be setting money aside for taxes. This is really something for people that don't quite get the hang of all the social media stuff, but also are kind of clueless on the accounting side of things. I'll go behind the scenes. I will go behind the curtain and I will look at all your accounting. I will look at everything financial, your bookkeeping, how it's set up, what you're doing, what you're not doing, the systems you have in place, what's working for you, and what you should be considering doing going forward. Because as things and people get their businesses going and it ramps up more, it does become more complicated. But with this Lens and Ledger Review, you'll get a full breakdown of what's working and what needs fixing. You'll get clear insight into your finances and you'll get actionable next steps. We will go behind the scenes and see what's working for you and then schedule a call where we'll go over everything we find too. You'll have a report that you can take away that'll tell you what you need to do and the actionable steps and everything that we're going to cover in a call. So if you're interested in something like this, reach out to me, whether it's through Facebook or for email, beardedbookkeepingco@gmail.com. So if you're somebody that thinks that they need a little bit of help and just want us to look at a snapshot of everything and give you actionable advice and a plan, we're giving away a select number of these content and client audits and the Lens and Ledger reviews for free. So because you're the first people to get this guide, we're extending this offer to you. Please reach out at beardedbookkeepingco@gmail.com and we can set that up for you because it's only going to be free for a limited time and we want to be able to help you as much as we can. So thank you for enjoying this course and any feedback that you have, I would love to get that as well. Feel free to drop me an email or a DM on Facebook. If you like the course, let me know what you liked. Let me know what you want to see next. Let me know if you want to see another course. I'm working on potentially putting another course together that goes a little more in depth on some of the marketing things and discovery calls and a little bit of things like that, sales tax. So if that's stuff that you want to see and you want to see another guide, let me know and I can start working on that and get that out. I would love to get one out at the end of the year this year.